This is San Diego's Fox in the Morning with Mark Bailey, Desiree Carvajal, and Christina Russo. San Diego's Fox in the Morning.
The reality.
Right now, over to Mark.
Okay, thank you. My guests are already commenting on that last story about Michael Moore. Ken Cater is here this morning from the Democratic Party, former chair of the Democratic Party here in San Diego, now executive director.
Yes.
Well,
It's just sad.
Mark Price, let me introduce you now.
I appreciate
Mark
it.
Price from the Republican Party.
A once great party founded by Thomas Jefferson has now down to such a low level that it's resorting to selling Michael Moore's underwear to get votes.
These
Think
guys
about this.
just
Think
can't
about this.
take a joke.
Oh,
I mean, lighten up, have a laugh. Goodness gracious.
We're at
noodles.
war trying to defend this country. We've got a great Vice President Cheney telling us how we're going to continue to defend this country, and they're worried about telling jokes and selling Michael Moore's underwear. We got a problem. We got a problem.
Okay, well, let's talk about the debate last night. Nice start to the conversation, though, I have to admit. Ken, and I'll start with you last night. First off, this thing was going up against a baseball game last night, a Major League playoff game, so we don't really even know who was watching this and what kind of numbers last night. But how important was it?
Well, I think it's important in that, you know, the second chair is important. People have to know who's a heartbeat away from the presidency. I think a lot got accomplished on both sides, actually. Edwards showed that he could go toe-to-toe with the longest resume in Washington and was able to show that a long resume does not equal good judgment. But the best part of it was the Republicans coming out bragging about how well Cheney did. Now that's in contrast to Bush's failure last week, so it's got to make you wonder who's really in charge, who is really the head guy on the ticket, because it was Cheney who was the architect of the failed policy in Iraq. And the other highlight that I loved was when Cheney said, "I've never said on public television that Iraq and Saddam Hussein and 9/11 were connected," and he said it on 60 Minutes, and MSNBC busted him within 10 minutes and
now
showed his clip
there was a lot of
from Meet the Press.
inaccuracies on either side in this case, and but that's one
That's
that you can't
the-
get away,
right, that's the
away
big
from
lie.
if it's on tape.
Right.
Mark, your initial thoughts about how important this was last night.
Oh, I think it was very important. I believe that these people are a heartbeat away, and that's why I was so happy that Vice President Cheney did as well as he did. He showed us he's a man of confidence, he's a man of experience, he's a person who will be calm in the face of the horrible war we are facing. And I think that people today are forgetting the fact that we're at war. We have got an enemy that we are trying to combat that is different than any enemy we have ever had in our history. People who not only will cut your head off, they want to go after women and children. And we've got the Democrats who are out there belittling, making stuff up, exaggerating the truth as if this is some fun and games. And I think what Cheney did last night, to his credit, was he put a calm in the room, and he brought a sensible nature to the fact that these are trying times. These are times that require people to be on target, and his resume, and which I agree is fantastic, suits him for this present position, is what's needed at this time.
Well, now, when you say they put a calm in the room, Desiree promised me $5 if I could get both of you to admit it was a snooze last night. Did you find it boring? Did you find it stimulating? Or did you find it a snooze? And remember, it's worth $5 to me if you found it a snooze.
Oh, I didn't think it was a snooze at all. I think, as I said, Edwards went toe-to-toe. You know, the online polls have Edwards winning this thing by a margin of 2-1, and that's like 1 million people
Well,
who have
now let's
voted.
be fair about the polls. The snap polls that were taken last night were split. Some say that Edwards won. Some say that Dick Cheney won. And the end, does it really matter who actually won? Because we saw in the presidential debate, hands down, everybody agrees John Kerry won, but the internals seem to indicate that the President Bush actually won most of the arguments in the debate. So does it really matter who won?
I think so, because as we know now, all the trends have shifted back to Kerry. As the Democrats now have the momentum. Whatever gap was left after the Republican convention has now been decisively closed. I'm certain that they were unable to open it up again last night, particularly Edwards' strong suit and the Democrats' strong suit, which is domestic policy. And when the failures of the Bush administration on tax policy, on health care, on the unemployed, Cheney's atrocious right-wing voting record, voting against the Martin Luther King holiday, voting against releasing Nelson Mandela, voting against Meals on Wheels, voting against the Department of Education. I mean, this guy is Darth Vader.
Well, let's talk about voting records. And Mark, let me turn it over to you to respond. But voting records were finally put on the table last night because up till now, really, John Kerry and John Edwards' voting records haven't really been a major centerpiece of the campaign. And now it seems that they are, along with the president and vice president's voting records.
Well, I think the voting record should be there, and I've been saying that all along. I think it's been disgusting and appalling that the Democrats have not wanted and have done everything that they possibly can to make sure that John Kerry's voting record doesn't come to the front. They have masqueraded, in many respects, all these other little nuances. Let's focus on this, let's focus on that, because by God, we don't want you to take a good look at John Kerry's voting record. Here's an example. On Friday, I debated at UCSD Midge Costanza, who is the first woman to ever be appointed as an advisor to the president, to Jimmy Carter. I made the comment that at the two conventions, the Republicans focused on Bush's voting record, on his performance, and his vision for America. Democrats focused on Kerry, and they admitted this, on his being a war hero and how much they hated Bush and why they hated Bush. That was it. They didn't go into Kerry's record. And I said to the Democrats, you have to ask why. What is it they're trying to hide? Why don't they want you to look at the record? Midge Costanza gets up there and says, well, they're not hiding the record. You can go to the website, you can go to the Senate website and find it. Then a Democrat in the audience stood up and says, but wait a minute, why should we have to look for it? Mark Price is right. Why are they afraid to put his record out there?
Ken?
The record of the Republicans on domestic policy, on their failed foreign policy, is atrocious. John Edwards pointed out over and over again how there's no connection. Saddam Hussein did not attack us, yet we took all of the might and strength, all of our blood and treasure, and put it in Iraq for no reason, and now we have a disaster on our hands. We probably could have, imagine what we could have done with Osama bin Laden if we would have put 140,000 troops on the ground in Afghanistan to really go after that guy in earnest, instead of farming it out to warlords. It's the Republicans who are trying to shade the issues and hide what's really going on here. There is no connection between the war in Iraq and any national policy that we had to commit to a major war on.
That was a major point now that John Edwards tried to make last night. Mark, do you feel like there was an adequate response by Dick Cheney?
No, we have not had on both sides a real foreign policy that makes sense since the Cold War, which was a containment policy.
Which was a Truman policy, by the way. That was the Democrats who started that.
And we have not had a foreign policy that's been consistent since that ended. And that's a problem. We've got to, as a country, determine what our foreign policy is and get behind it.
That Iraq was wrong.
No, I don't. No, I don't. I don't agree at all that it's wrong.
And for that?
I'll be happy to tell you.
There are terrorists in 60 countries. Are we going to invade them all? That's the only justification left now for Iraq. No. Cheney can't even defend it anymore.
No, you know what? We're almost out of time, so I started with you, Ken. Let me end with you, Mark. You've got like 5 seconds to wrap it up.
All right. The reason we're in Iraq is because of the arrogance of Saddam Hussein, because terrorism exists there, and George Bush was straight with the American people then, and he is today. We're going to go after terrorism wherever it is in the world to try to keep it off our shore. He's doing it. He's doing a fantastic job, and that's why he is going to be and should be reelected on November 2nd.
We got to go. Thank you both so much. It's always a pleasure. You guys did okay. Always good to see both. Thanks for coming in. I'm sure we'll see you again soon.
This is San Diego's Fox in the Morning with Mark Bailey, Desiree Garbahal, and Christina Russo. San Diego's Fox in the Morning.
The reality